Okay. Okay. Today we are really, really honored to have Barbara Slavin of the Stimson Center. It is now March 3rd. Can you imagine? March 3rd, 2025, reminding everybody that the time change in the United States comes this coming weekend. So we will be at a different time zone, difference than before. Next Monday, we will take a break partly because I will be traveling. I will be in London. Um, and this is a great opportunity to look outside. The whole world is, if something bad happens here, there's going to be repercussions there. We know that. But for those of us less familiar with Iran, let's listen to Barbara Slavin and let's find out, among other things, why the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action became the JCPOA and never became a treaty. Maybe she can explain that, among other things. And tell us, Barbara, also about the Stimson Center.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure. Happy to. Well, I've been working on the Iran issue for many years. I was a journalist for a long time and was lucky enough to be able to travel to Iran, which is rare for Americans. And I think the theme that I've seen, I wrote a book some years ago called Bitter Friends, Bosom Enemies. The theme is one of missed opportunities on both sides to improve relations. And the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action turned out to be, I'm afraid, one of those instances. Um, Iran has a nuclear program. It's had one for many, many years, going back to before the 1979 Islamic Revolution. It was a program that was actually started by the United States in the late 1950s under something called Atoms for Peace. And the Shah of Iran, the King of Iran, was a great friend of the United States, and the US was very supportive of his ambitions to develop nuclear power. But that all changed after the Islamic Revolution and the introduction of a government that has largely been estranged from the United States for the last 46 years. Um, so Iran's program has slowly developed. It stopped for a while after the revolution and then ramped up again during the Iran-Iraq War, which was enormously destructive to both those countries. And it really began to make progress in the late 1990s, early 2000s, when Iran had facilities that it had not declared to the International Atomic Energy Agency. And there were revelations about this in the year 2002. Ironically, the US invaded Iraq, which did not have a nuclear program at that time, and refused for many years to talk to Iran, which had this advancing program. European countries, the so-called E3, Britain, France, and Germany, stepped in initially to talk to the Iranians. And there were conversations that expanded to include the United States, China, and Russia. So it was called the P5+1, the permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany that negotiated with Iran. And eventually, this resulted in an agreement under the Obama administration in 2015, under which Iran agreed to drastically reverse its nuclear program in return for relief of economic sanctions, both multilateral and some US economic sanctions. It was not a treaty, as Professor Whitman points out. It was clear that the Obama administration could not get the necessary two-thirds support from the US Senate. Both houses of Congress were controlled by the Republican Party. So there was another form of legislation that basically let Obama implement this agreement through executive orders. It was something called INARA. I'm not sure if I can remember what that stands for anymore. Something the
uh,
Iran
we'll look it up.
clear. Basically, two-thirds of both the House and the Senate would have had to have voted to block the JCPOA to
Uh-huh.
prevent it from going into
Mhm.
effect. So kind of a negative uh,
Okay.
rather than a positive affirmation of this agreement. But Obama began to implement it. And then, of course, in 2016, Donald Trump was elected president. And Trump campaigned against the JCPOA. He insisted that it was the worst deal ever negotiated and that he, Donald Trump, could negotiate a better deal. In 2018, he withdrew from the agreement, even though Iran was still in full compliance with it, and reimposed all the economic sanctions that had been eased. Europe tried to compensate but could not. Major European companies wouldn't do business with Iran and risk losing business in the United States. And the deal basically began to unravel. Joe Biden made an effort to revive it. So did the Iranians, but for a variety of reasons, which we can go into, this didn't work. The government in Iran that had negotiated the deal went out of office. A hardline new administration came in and was frankly and reasonably distrustful of the United States, wanted guarantees that the US would not withdraw again from the deal. And as you know, in our system, there are no such guarantees because every 4 years we have presidential elections. And if the administration changes, we can see a rather radical change in US policy as well, as you and Ukraine in particular are witnessing now. Um, so the situation right now is quite dire. Iran is suffering under extreme economic sanctions, uh, in a very bad situation, facing high inflation, the extreme devaluation of the Iranian currency versus the dollar. And at the same time, Iran has accelerated the nuclear program to uh, an incredible degree. I was just looking, the IAEA has a new report out, and apparently Iran now has 275 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% of the isotope U-235. This is very, very close to weapons grade, and it's very easy to turn 60% into 90%, which is weapons grade. Basically, Iran has enough material, if further enriched, to make more than half a dozen nuclear weapons, if it makes the political decision to do that. So this is Iran's leverage against the United States and other countries. But at the same time, Iran is not only in an economic situation that is very poor, but it's also lost a lot of regional influence because of the events that have occurred since the Hamas attack on Israel of October 7th, 2020.
Oh, we seem to be frozen. Barbara, don't know if you can hear us. Um, Barbara Slavin's connection is not, if Barbara can hear
Uh-oh.
me.
All right, my
Okay,
internet. Am I
okay.
back?
Yes, we lost you for half a minute. I'm so
Tell
glad
me
to.
where I faded out, and I'll
You were
read
talking about the decline in Iran's influence since
regional
the
influence.
Hamas,
Yeah.
the Hamas
Since the
October
Hamas
7th.
attacks.
Yeah.
Now, there's no evidence that Iran knew Hamas was going to do what it did on that day, but Iran had been a supporter of Hamas and, of course, supported other groups like Palestinian Islamic Jihad, as Hezbollah in Lebanon, various militias in Iraq, and the Houthi group in Yemen. All of these groups, one could argue, have suffered major setbacks. But in particular, Hamas, obviously, Gaza has been decimated. Hamas has lost many of its leaders. And Hezbollah, which was kind of the crown jewel of Iran's regional partners, has lost not only Hassan Nasrallah, its longtime leader, but other leaders, and suffered really catastrophic losses in because it very ill-advisedly jumped into the conflict with Israel in solidarity with Hamas, began to send rockets and missiles into northern Israel. So these groups are really on the back foot, many of them, possible exception of the Houthis, which have continued to be relatively unscathed, although not completely in Yemen. They've also suffered losses, and Yemen is in very poor condition. So Iran is in a situation where it really needs a new nuclear deal. It needs sanctions relief, but it's very mistrustful of the United States, again, for good reason. And it's not clear to me that the Trump administration has any kind of strategy for reaching a new agreement with Iran. Trump has talked about it, but he has yet to name a dedicated envoy to deal with Iran. He has tightened sanctions against Iran instead and seems content to let Iran sort of twist in the wind while he focuses on Gaza and Ukraine, at least at this point. Um, there are some deadlines coming, though, that may concentrate his mind, in addition to the Iranians developing more material that could be used for nuclear weapons. The UN resolution that endorsed the JCPOA expires next October. And there may be a movement by remaining members of the agreement to reinstate UN sanctions against Iran through a procedure known as snapback. Britain or France could do this if there is no agreement and Iran continues to advance its nuclear program. And Iran, in turn, has threatened that if UN sanctions are restored, it will quit the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and kick out remaining inspectors, uh, opening a 3-month period during which there could be some crisis talks, or Iran could move to weaponize, as North Korea did back in 2002, 2003. So I think although Iran is not sort of top of agenda now for the United States or the international community, it could very well come back on to the top of the agenda in a few months if we don't see any progress, any effort by the Trump administration to reach out to Iran or vice versa during that time. Maybe I'll stop
Yeah.
right there and we can look at
Yes.
aspects of this if
Um,
you want. I'm also happy to talk about Iran's internal politics, which are very fraught, as well as other regional issues.
Well, thank you, Barbara. And for everybody's vocabulary, NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, should be part of your vocabulary. I have a list of a few hundred acronyms, which are available for anybody who wants them. I think I'll send them to Barbara, which include military, economic, IFIs, international financials. Every time I see a term that I haven't seen before, I put it on the list. Um, well, two questions for me. One is, it used to be Iraq versus Iran. Now it's Saudi Arabia versus Iran. Why must we always take sides in these things? Why can't we try to, instead of seeing one as a pure friend and the other, as your book, which I read, it's a wonderful book, everybody. What, let's see, um, tell me again the name of it.
Sure. Bitter friends,
Bitter,
bosom enemies.
Bitter Friends, Bosom Enemies. You see, it's a wonderful title and it's a wonderful book. Uh, American policy seems to only keep one thing in mind, maybe two, but never three. It's very limited in nuance. We're not good at nuance. Um, would it be possible to have some productive relationship both with Saudi Arabia and with Iran? I'm guessing you would hope that we would someday. My second question,
Sure.
yeah.
Actually, I mean, one positive development that has occurred, partly as a result of Trump quitting the JCPOA, is that the Gulf countries, the Arab countries on the Persian Gulf, have actually largely reconciled with Iran. And in 2023, yeah, just 2 years ago, there was a deal brokered between Iran and Saudi Arabia by the Chinese and prior work done by the Iraqis also, where the two countries restored diplomatic relations. And the Saudis are very focused on their economic development. They don't want to see a conflict between the United States and Iran, between Israel and Iran. Israel, of course, has threatened repeatedly to attack Iran's nuclear installations with or without US help. And so the Saudis actually are trying to tamp down these conflicts now and would like to see a nuclear agreement between the US and Iran. The Israelis would not. The Israelis don't want to see Iran get sanctions relief because they still regard Iran as the sponsor of organizations that are dedicated to the extermination of Israel. So this is a complicated chessboard. And the Iranians, frankly, have done themselves no favors, I think, in their staunch opposition to Israel. This is what has really been the root cause of so many of Iran's problems with the United States over the years.
Mhm.
So if we're going to de-escalate the situation, yes, we need a nuclear agreement, but we need more than that. We need the Iranians to tone down their anti-Israel rhetoric. We need them to accept some sort of diplomatic resolution to the Israeli Palestinian conflict in concert with their Muslim brothers, with the Saudis, the Egyptians, others that have been working to try to come up with some sort of resolution to this conflict for
Mhm.
a long time, but have not been able to do so.
A couple more things for me, and as always, I encourage anybody to put in a chat or to unmute yourself. Oh, there are chats. Oh, that's mainly hello, hello. Okay. Um, in the Gulf states, why is Doha set aside? What's going on there? Why does Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states isolate Doha? Is Doha any worse in any way than the other Gulf states?
Well, there was a period when the Saudis tried to isolate Qatar, along with the Emiratis, Bahrainis, some others. But that also ended some years ago. I think Mohammed bin Salman, I won't say he's matured, but his foreign
Yeah.
policy, the Saudi leader, his foreign policy was catastrophically stupid and
Yeah.
self-defeating for a number of years. Witnessed the Saudi war on Yemen, and the isolation of Qatar. But that has changed. I think the Saudis are now competing with the Qataris to try to be mediators in all of these various
Right.
regional quarrels. We saw MBS hosting, the Russians and the Americans over Ukraine uh,
And
recently,
also
which
the warring parties in Sudan met in
yeah,
Saudi Arabia.
which so I think actually that MBS has a little bit of Qatar envy. Uh,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
Qataris famously have been mediating between Israel and Hamas. They've mediated between the United States and Iran. So have the Omanis. This is another country that historically has been a mediator in regional quarrels. So this is a good development. I encourage the Saudis to host talks. They may not succeed, but I think it's a good effort to try to resolve all the various conflicts in the region.
So this, would you say the Saudis are competing with Qatar? They're
Yeah, in my
becoming,
view, yeah, I think they definitely are.
yeah, uh,
Another way in which they compete, I mean, the Qataris host the largest U.S. military
right,
base
right,
in the
yeah,
region, by the way.
right. It's huge. Let's see. Um, I have so many questions that they're now canceling one another in my mind. Answer piece. Now, you who understand the history and culture of Iran, we read because as you say, it's rare to be able to travel there. That what we see in the media is that the younger generation seems to be Western oriented, seems to be a very energetic intellectual group, and probably most of them don't like their regime at all. Now, when you mentioned possible changes in Iran, uh, could you balance what you know of Iran's culture and society, and what does this imply for Iran's future if we could get rid of the old men with beards who seem to be the problem everywhere in the world?
Yeah, well,
Uh,
easier said than done.
yeah,
No, I mean, I think if there were a free and fair election in Iran, they would definitely vote out their current leadership. Which is very much out of touch with particularly younger generations in the country that are quite Western oriented, as you said. Not everyone. I mean, there are still some regime loyalists, obviously, and the regime takes care of the deep state, the security establishment, and is extremely repressive of civil society in the country. But your students may remember the Women Life Freedom movement of 2022, when many women refused to wear the obligatory headscarf and protested in the streets. Many joined them. And although this particular movement was suppressed, uh, friends of mine in Iran, those who visit there still tell me that in many parts of the country, particularly in the cities, women are not wearing headscarves. They've just stopped. And occasionally they are harassed or persecuted, arrested for it, but by and large, they go about their business. The regime cannot put every woman in jail, and the law is still on the books, but it is not being observed. And in this way, it resembles many other aspects of Iranian society. I mean, you're not supposed to be able to drink alcohol there, but I started going there in the 1990s, and people were always offering me alcohol in private homes, and you could watch satellite television and see films from all over the world and all sorts of things that were nominally banned in the country were actually available to people in the privacy of their homes. So the difference now is that what was private is now also public increasingly. The other thing we've seen is that although Iran has elections, it has elected offices for president, parliament, and so on. Uh, Voter participation is way down. And it's increasingly difficult for the regime to summon people to participate in these elections when people sense that they don't see any real change and that the deep state remains in control no matter who is in the presidency.
So they really do have a deep state.
They
That's a
definitely,
joke. That's a joke.
no, they
Um,
do, they do. And
when
unfortunately, the other aspect is that, of course, it's become very oriented toward fellow authoritarian states like Russia and China. And of course, as you know, the Iranians have been supplying drones to Russia to use against Ukraine. Uh, uh, Absolutely disastrous development. And in fact, I have a website, small site called Middle East Perspectives on the Stimson site. And if you Google Middle East Perspectives, the last piece we put up was about financial ties between Russia and Iran, how they have tried to get around sanctions and get around the US dollar by increasingly linking up their financial systems, and how many Iranians are now concerned that the Russians will dump Iran if they see the prospect of better relations with the United States
oh,
under the Trump administration.
mhm.
Russia and Iran have had their differences historically. Russia took over parts of what used to be the Persian Empire. A lot of distrust between Russians and Iranians, and this policy of being supportive of Russia and Ukraine is not popular in Iran. Iranians now are thinking that the Russians will quickly sell them out if they see a possibility of getting out from under US economic sanctions or European economic
Mm. Which could happen. Now,
which could happen. Sure.
you mentioned women going unveiled and some, would you call this liberalization or lack of competence on the part of the regime?
Oh, it's human nature. I mean, in Iran, anytime you try to force people into doing something, they rebel. So in the lead up to the Iranian Revolution of 1979, women who were opposed to the Shah of Iran, to the monarchy, would put on headscarves
Oh,
as a protest against the secular nature of the regime. Then after the revolution, when the authorities announced that women had to wear the headscarves, we began to see protests against that. And over time, women of Iran, very well educated, that's one thing that they have been able to do under the system is go to university and so on. And so it's not like the Taliban in Afghanistan. If you wore the proper dress, you could go to school, you could serve in a number of different professions. And so over time, they just got tired of it. Plus, if you look at where the Iranian diaspora is, it's all in the West. And so Iranians in Iran with relatives in the United States, in Europe, um, were very much influenced by Western ideas, and of course the internet, penetration of the internet, the ability to see how other people live in other countries, music, art, film. Iran is famous, of course, for its excellent films. One just won an Academy Award last night. So the orientation is toward the West, and people just have had it with being told what to do. Religion, including Islam, is not supposed to be imposed. It's supposed to be something you embrace voluntarily. And so there's not supposed to be compulsion in Islam, and yet the Islamic Republic uses compulsion.
We'll get to Baxter's question in a moment. Can you explain to us, you went to Iran in the 1990s. What drew you there? What did you find likable, fascinating? You've been involved in this for decades. What is the charm of it for you?
Yeah. Well, I'm someone who has always been interested in countries that the United States has no relations with or bad relations with. And I was a little bit left wing in college. I wanted to study a commie language, and so I studied Russian. Я по-русски говорю. I
Uh-huh.
went actually to the
Я тоже,
Soviet
я тоже.
Union.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to the Soviet Union as a student to what was then called Leningrad in the 1970s. And there
Молодец.
I found out that most Russians were not very enamored of their political system.
Молодец. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that they
Uh,
actually liked the United States and were not keen on communism. So the light bulb went off in my head. Then I had an opportunity as a journalist to live in China for 2 years when China was opening up to the West, which I thought was fascinating. And then as a journalist, I also was based in Cairo, where I traveled all around the Middle East. Didn't get a chance to go to Iran during that time, but I was intrigued by it. I always heard from journalists who went there that it was very different from the stereotype. And so in 1996, I had an editor who wanted me to do a piece about the status of women in the Muslim world. The Taliban had just consolidated control in Afghanistan the first time, and of course, were doing terrible things to women. And so would I look at the situation of women in other Muslim countries? So I said, let me go back to Cairo. I had lived there for 4 years. Let me look at where women stand there. And let me go to Iran. I've just always, really been curious. I wrote about the revolution for the New York Times Week in Review, believe it or not, doing little summaries of events for I don't know how many years. So I knew a fair amount, but I had never been there. And so I went, and I was blown away, like I had been by the Soviet Union in the 1970s. Here was a country with a government that hated the United States and people who were very welcoming, extremely welcoming and curious, and wanted to show me all of the glories of Persian culture, ancient culture, from food to fashion to film, and we're really looking for a better relationship with the United States that, had been prevented by political developments. So that was the beginning, and I was lucky enough to be able to continue to go. I went 6 times while I was a reporter, and then another 3 times as a think tanker. And unfortunately, I have not been back since 2013. That was my last visit. Have not been able to get a visa since then. And frankly, it became too dangerous because Iran started locking up Western journalists and using them as pawns to
yeah.
get various advantages from Western countries. So I tried my best to keep up with developments there. I still have a lot of friends there. I have Iranians in Iran who write articles for me, and others who have recently left the country who are still very connected, who write articles for me. We did one recently on the shortage of pharmaceuticals in Iran, uh,
Uh,
quite
yeah.
serious problem for many Iranians.
Who
So
was
I do my best to stay on top of it, even though I
who
can't.
was your employer when you were based in Cairo?
When I was in Cairo, I was the correspondent for The Economist magazine.
Economist. Oh, 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 oh. Only the best, Barbara. The New York,
Well, I've had my moments when I've not worked for the best, but I've also worked for USA Today for 12 years. They were the ones who sent me to Iran. Initially, I've worked for Al Monitor, which is a very interesting website focusing on the Middle East. And I even worked for a conservative American newspaper called the Washington Times. Uh,
yes,
I was their assistant managing editor for a year and a half, and I found out that not all conservatives are bad people.
I've
So
I've published in the Washington Times. I
they're
admit it.
actually pretty
Yeah,
critical of Trump,
yeah. Uh,
if you read them
did,
lately.
did, did everybody know that it's now forbidden for U.S. embassies to use government money to purchase the Wall Street Journal?
Now they're
Because,
critical of Trump as well, and
yeah,
primarily over Ukraine.
that's right. Um, uh, okay, let's go to Baxter's. I have other questions, but Baxter, the new president of Iran,
Yeah.
said to be reformist. Is he really?
Yeah, President Pezeshkian, he was elected last summer after the incumbent president died in a helicopter crash. The president he replaced was horrible, a man named Ibrahim Raisi, who was a cleric and someone who, as a young cleric, signed off on the summary execution of more than 5,000 political prisoners in Iran
Oh
at
my
the end of
gosh.
the Iran-Iraq War. He was also very poorly educated. They called him Mr. Sixth Grade. He had only a sixth grade secular education. His education was otherwise largely religious in religious seminaries. He was an awful man. I met him twice at the UN, and he was thoroughly unimpressive. Masoud Pezeshkian, the current president, is a cardiologist actually by background, and he's much less obnoxious. Um, is he a reformist? There is a movement in Iran that was called the Reform Movement. It came of age in the 1990s and under a man named Mohammed Khatami, who was president for 2 terms. It tried to uh, make Iran a more liberal and less repressive country. It succeeded in some ways. As I mentioned, people's personal lives certainly became a lot freer under Khatami. I think that was his major contribution. He also reached out to the United States, and there was an improvement in relations under the second term of Bill Clinton, but that evaporated under the Bush administration, which decided to put Iran on a so-called axis of evil in 2002, which was extremely unwise. I think we blew a major opportunity with Iran during the first Bush term. Um, but Pezeshkian was health minister under one of Hatami's terms, and so he's technically a reformist. But it's a very weak movement. The true power in Iran lies with someone called the supreme leader. This is a cleric, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He took over from the first supreme leader, a guy named Ayatollah Khomeini, who was the leader of the revolution. And the real power is with the supreme leader and with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, with the deep state, with the organizations that are military or security related in nature. And the reformists have a very short leash, and they are really not allowed to get too far out ahead of the supreme leader in any way. So now we see a lot of arguments in Iran over whether there should be nuclear negotiations or not. Pezeshkian wants negotiations with the United States, uh, but the deep state, I think, is very conflicted about this. Just yesterday, I think. A man named Javad Zarif, who had been foreign minister under the administration that got the JCPOA. He was an appointed vice president for strategic affairs. He's now had to step down because one of his kids was born in the United States when he was a student here. He is considered very close to the reformists, and the hardliners have been gunning for him for months. So I don't think, I mean, you can call Pezeshkian a reformist, but it's kind of meaningless these days because as long as the supreme leader is around and is supported by these deep state institutions, they're the ones who are going to make the decisions about what
Well,
Iran does.
again, I guess then, and I remember thinking this last summer, is it important that Ali Khamenei tolerated the victory of this reformist president? What was he thinking? Was he trying to play both sides or to appear
Look,
to
he's
be Democrat?
desperate. Yeah, he's desperate to not look like what he is, which is a dictator, or at least an authoritarian leader. He's desperate to have the trappings of democracy without the reality. And
Um,
and so they permitted Pezeshkian to run. I mean, they had he won in a runoff election. I think there was only 50% turnout, which is very low in Iran. And the only reason he won was because the other guy was so odious. A guy named Saeed Jalili, who's a complete troglodyte and true believer in the Islamic Republic and all of its repressive uh, policies. He's a failed nuclear negotiator as well. Had failed to reach an agreement with the P5+1. That only happened after there was an election in Iran in 2013, and a man named Hassan Rouhani was elected, replacing a man named Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was a hardline leader and a very ineffective one.
mhm.
So, that's why Pezeshkian won, but it was a very limp endorsement.
Okay, because I mean, I guess how many might have had the option of saying of annulling that election. You use this interesting term, desperate to appear democratic. Isn't it interesting that so many authoritarian countries, including Russia, want to appear to be democratic? Why do they bother?
It's a really good
Uh,
question. I mean,
uh,
why bother to have elections when they're meaningless? You'd have to ask Vladimir Putin. I
yeah,
mean, China doesn't have elections, so
yeah. I mean,
Xi Jinping
yeah,
at least isn't a hypocrite. Maybe there are elections within the Communist Party, but
yeah.
not elections
Um,
in the country as a
I'm
whole. But Putin, look, there was a period after the collapse of the Soviet Union when there were elections, and Putin has maintained the shell of a democracy without any of the content.
Mhm. I'm thinking of less important countries, frankly, like Cameroon, where I lived, where they nobody believes in these elections. But President Biya, if he's still alive, we have no idea, um, wants to appear to be democratic. I mean, who's he trying to impress? The United States? Certainly not. France? I mean, I, I are they thinking anachronistically when Western countries had a much greater influence in the world than they do now? It seems with this radical readjustment that we saw last Friday in the Oval Office and over the past years, um, it used to be that United States, Britain, France, Germany were role models for dictators who wanted to please them. But I guess with these radical shifts, any ideas about what authoritarian leaders will do in the less important countries? It doesn't serve their interest really to be pleasing Western countries. Uh, or maybe they believe that it is. Maybe the way.
I don't know. I think, it's a vanity project for a lot of folks. I mean, I remember, Hafez al-Assad, the father of the last dictator of
Syria.
Syria, who
Yeah.
used to make people come out and vote, and they would say 99.9% or 99.1% voted in favor of Assad.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's a vanity project as much as anything. But yeah, I mean, there used to be a period in which the United States supported human rights and supported democracy. But even before Trump, there's been a lot of hypocrisy in that. I mean, I remember when Condi Rice, who was a national security advisor and Secretary of State under George W. Bush, supported Palestinian elections because they wanted to have a successor to Yasser Arafat, the leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization. And they supported these elections in 2006, and Hamas won. And then all of a sudden, we didn't support democratic elections for the
Right.
Palestinians.
Likewise in
So,
Algeria.
so if the party that wins is not the party you like and you then
Yes.
renounce them, then what's the purpose of having
Um,
supporting democracy, quote unquote, or
yes.
exporting democracy, quote unquote?
We did a similar thing in Algeria. And we're getting to Stimson. I want to get to Stimson. First,
Sure.
you mentioned Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis. How do we see them? How can we identify them? I think of Hamas as the most belligerent group. The Houthis are just kind of crazy. And Hezbollah, I guess, rules Lebanon. Is that correct?
Not anymore, or
Okay.
not completely. No, there's been a big shift. Hamas, I mean, uh, wanted to put the Palestinian issue back on the international agenda because, frankly, nobody has been paying attention to it or had been paying attention to it. And the Israelis, particularly under Netanyahu, have been gobbling up Palestinian land on the West Bank, making it increasingly impossible for Palestinians to even dream of having their own state, while at the same time treating Palestinians as second-class citizens under essentially an apartheid regime in the West Bank and Gaza. So that was Hamas's idea, but of course it boomeranged spectacularly, and the Israelis, in response to the horrific terrorist attacks of October 7th, 2023, have essentially destroyed the Gaza Strip, killed 50,000 or more people, most of them women and children, and destroyed most of the buildings in Gaza, apartment buildings, universities, schools, hospitals, you name it. And Hamas itself, however, still exists because it purports to represent Palestinian aspirations for self-rule. And it remains to be seen what will happen. Some of the external leaders of Hamas have now admitted that it was a dreadful mistake and that Hamas has to abandon armed struggle because armed struggle has only brought disaster to the Palestinian people. But it's unclear who or what will ever replace Hamas in Gaza. There is no new administration. The Israelis are still essentially in control of the place. There has been a ceasefire, very tentative, which allowed humanitarian aid to go into Gaza in return for release of remaining Israeli hostages that were taken by Hamas. But that ceasefire is on life support. It's not clear if it's going to continue or whether Israel is going to start bombarding the poor people of Gaza yet again. Hezbollah is in better shape, but not in great shape. Has lost its leadership, killed by the Israelis, and much of its infrastructure in Beirut and in the southern part of the country in a war with the Israelis, um, which is also under a ceasefire, but not clear if that is going to continue. There is a new president and prime minister in Lebanon, and they are trying to um, assert some authority in the country. For a long time, Hezbollah was really in control of the Lebanese government. It's not clear if this new leadership in Lebanon will be able to pull this off. They need a lot of support, particularly financial support, from the wealthy Arabs who are being asked to bankroll everything now, including Palestinian reconstruction. The other major shift has been in Syria, where the Assad regime was deposed after 4 decades in power by a group of Sunni Muslim militias that had a lot of support from Turkey in particular. And there is a new leader in Syria who is trying to sort of consolidate control and to reconcile with the many different ethnic and political groups in the country. You may remember that Syria, a civil war started in 2011 under the Arab Spring, and the rebellion didn't really succeed until last December, when Assad was overthrown by this group that had maintained a pocket of control in part of Syria. But there are a lot of issues there. They're jihadi groups, they're Kurdish groups, they're Christians. And it's going to be a miracle, frankly, if they can create a coherent new system there. I neglected to mention that the Israelis have also occupied a large chunk of southern Syria as a kind of expanded buffer zone and are continuing to go after their perceived enemies in Syria. So this is also going to be a long project. A lot of reconstruction has to happen in Syria as well. This is why Iran is not in great shape. They have a lot of influence in Iraq, which the US, of course, invaded in 2003, overthrew the dictatorship in that country, and ushered in elections which brought about governments that are Shia Muslim majority and that have very, very strong ties with Iran. So Iran
Yep,
still has a lot of influence in Iraq. We'll see if that is undermined as well. I think that's a
yep.
goal of a lot of countries.
It is said that President Bush, when told that there were Sunnis and Shias, had no idea what this was and thought maybe that meant they were not Muslim. Here's a photo in today's post of Muslims in Gaza
Yeah.
celebrating Ramadan in the open streets. And just a reminder to the reason we're talking about these things is that, as Barbara says, Iran bankroll, they support militarily and economically some of these groups. I would say um, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in the West Bank. Why bother having two separate um, militant groups? I mean, the
Well,
geographically.
Hezbollah is Shia and Lebanese. Hamas is
Okay.
Sunni and Palestinian. Majority of
Okay. Very
Palestinians are
important.
Sunni Muslims. And this
Uh,
is one of the reasons, actually, why the links between Iran and Hamas have always been questionable, because most of Iran's regional allies are Shia Muslims, fellow Shia Muslims. The Shia are a minority in Islam. Iran is the largest Shia Muslim country in the world.
yeah.
Um, and so it has these historic ties with Arabs who are Shia. But Hamas is Sunni.
Yeah.
And so, this is another reason why you might be able to essentially peel the Palestinians away from
Mhm.
Iran. And Iran is not in position to provide the kind of support to Palestinian groups that it has in the past.
Who know very little about the region, the way I kind of, my mnemonic device sort of is, I think of Sunnis as the more normal brotherhood that seems to dominate in the majority of the Arab world, and the Shia as the more militant ones based in Iran. Not
Not
true.
fair at all. No, no. I
Please,
mean,
please correct me. Please correct
Islamic
me.
State group is Sunni,
Um, well,
militantly Sunni, and they're the ones who were hacking people's heads off not so
um,
long ago in Syria and Iraq, including Americans. No, I mean there are suicide bombers, there are terrorists on both Sunni and Shia, and so I think that's a very unfair comment.
Oh, no, it's just wrong because I don't claim to understand any of this.
Yeah.
But I believe that many of the countries in the Middle East seem to be majority Sunni. Is that
Yes,
correct?
it's correct.
Yeah,
Most Middle
yeah,
Eastern countries are
yeah.
majority Sunni.
Why do these groups bother being antagonistic towards each other? I know that there's a theological question of what happened in the 8th century. This is ridiculous. It cannot be the real cause of conflict. Why have they bifurcated so
I,
radically?
why did Catholics and Protestants fight
Yeah,
for years and years and
well,
years in Europe?
and in northern,
There are religious reasons, there are tribal and nationalistic reasons. I mean, Iran was actually it was Zoroastrian and then it was Sunni after the Arab conquest, uh, 7th century, and then there was an Iranian leader who forced everyone to become Shia to distinguish the Persian Empire from the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Ottoman Empire, which was
okay,
Sunni.
okay.
And
Well, that,
so
yeah.
this actually, the real divide dates in many ways to the 16th century, not the 7th century. And so Iran has historically, since the 16th century, been Shia Muslim.
Thank you very
You
much
find
for,
you
yeah.
find pockets of Shia, mostly they were downtrodden minorities in Arab states. So you would find them in Lebanon, particularly in the south. You find them in Iraq. you find them in Bahrain, you find them in Saudi Arabia. And Iran, historically, well before the Islamic Revolution, established ties with fellow Shia in these various countries, and often used them as a sort of, fifth column to gain influence in Arab
Ah,
states.
this
So
is
this is
very
an old
helpful.
pattern.
Yeah.
It's a very old pattern. It wasn't invented by the Islamic
No,
Republic,
very helpful. So Ottoman Empire, largely Sunni, uh, Shias,
which
the
explains why Turkey supported the group that overthrew Bashar al-Assad in
very
Syria,
helpful.
because Bashar was an ally of Iran. Iran helped save the Assad regime during the Syrian civil war.
Thank you so much. This really makes it a little bit clearer to me, and I hope to others in the group. The rebellion in 2011 appeared to be gaining steam for about a year, I think, maybe a couple of years. Then Russia came in.
Russia came in
Uh,
after the
uh,
Iranians asked them to come in.
yes, and so Russia restored this brutal regime, Assad, who really turned Syria into a very repressive and very dangerous place to live, I think, with the help of the Russians, yes?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Russians were provided air support, and the
yeah,
Iranians organized various Shia militias with people coming from as far away as Pakistan
yeah,
help save Assad. And he didn't restore control over all of the country, but he had control over what they called useful Syria, which was the major cities in Syria and the coastal areas on the
yes,
Mediterranean. And this is what was eliminated in this lightning fast
yeah,
offensive last December.
yeah. And I was lucky to visit that country in the 80s before all of this. I went to Aleppo, which was a marvelous city, now largely destroyed, I guess. Thank you. I have, for the purpose of everybody else, you see that I'm willing to expose my ignorance. I encourage you to do the same and ask any question. Until you do, Stimson, tell us about your vision of what a think tank can do, and
Mhm.
where does Stimson lie? I think many people in this call may never have heard of Stimson. Tell us.
Sure. The Stimson Center was created 35 years ago by a wonderful man named Michael Crepon, who was a nuclear expert, non-proliferation expert. And its focus initially was on South Asia, Pakistan, India.
Mhm,
It also had a very strong program in East Asia and
mhm,
continues to. It has marvelous expertise on China and Japan
mhm.
as well. Middle East, it dabbles in. I'm sort of a dabbler for them, I guess, but it hasn't been its strong suit, I would say. It focuses a lot on non-proliferation, nuclear and conventional, rules of war, uh, uh, on uh, development issues in a lot of these areas, and strategic issues involving the United States and South Asia, the Middle East, East Asia. It's one of the smaller think tanks in Washington. It's nonpartisan and very professional and collegial, and I've enjoyed working with them. They don't try to tell me what to think or what to say, and that's not true at all of the think tanks in DC, which some of which have an agenda. And of course, it depends on the funding stream. And I'll have to admit now that we're going through a bit of a crisis because some of our money came from USAID.
Oh,
We're not getting it anymore.
oh, yes. And some of the people on this call have previously worked for projects funded by AID in Ukraine, and we have a little secret society of people giving it um, pointers and tips and contacts. We're actively working on that. We
Yeah.
heard a few weeks ago from a member of the faith-based community actions, and of course they too are looking for funds. But within our own circles, three of our members were laid off 2 weeks ago in Kiev. So we're trying to pool these. Does Stimson, we know they don't have money. Do they take interns?
They do, usually you need to bring your funding with you.
Uh, well,
Not so many,
or be willing not to be paid. Is that a
No,
possibility?
we don't have unpaid interns. We pay
Ah,
people, but there's
okay.
some universities in the United States will actually support their interns at Stimson. But yeah, we do. We have spring and summer interns, and many good publications. And I invite folks to go to stimson.org and check out the website and see all the programs and also job opportunities that are listed as well. It's a very fine and highly principled think tank in Washington.
That's great to hear about that. What is the function of a think tank? If it's nonpartisan, and if the tax laws forbid it to take specific positions on legislation that's under consideration, what then can be the influence of a think tank?
I'll just speak about my own program. I mean, I think one of you know, the major things that I do is try to um, bring voices from the Middle East and publish them on a site where they're available to the entire world, to policymakers in the United States, but beyond that, to influence the debate by running commentaries that are fact-based. We try to analyze
Mhm.
uh, international developments and provide insights that can be helpful to policymakers, to journalists, to others. Um, I think that that's probably the main function of think tanks. We testify before Congress if we're asked for our opinions, and write op-eds, do all these sorts of things to try really to illuminate international problems. Not necessarily to expect that our advice will be taken, but hopefully that it will help inform solutions to a lot of conflicts around the world.
Um, and is it difficult to do an op-ed under the Stimson name without violating the tax laws, which forbid
Yeah.
taking positions on a specific piece of legislation? Is that ever
It takes no opinions as an institution, but we as individuals are entitled to.
very important distinction? You mentioned earlier, I think we can almost close with this Middle East perspective. Now that's a
Perspectives with an S. That is a site
perspective.
which I maintain. I write for it occasionally, but I edit all the pieces which appear on that site, and so people are welcome to take a look. As I mentioned, there's one that involves Ukraine, which just went up on Friday about the financial ties between Russia and Iran and how they might be affected if there's a ceasefire in Ukraine, for example, or if Russia-US relations improve.
Is this separate from Stimson or part of
No,
Stimson?
it's hosted by
Yeah, yeah.
Stimson, so it's part of the Stimson,
Well,
but it has
Barbie,
its own URL. So
yes, you open a whole new world for us. Of course, we know Heritage and Brookings and AEI, and you're quite right. You mentioned Stimson as a smaller and more nonpartisan, or is nonpartisan, um, and that has a very high professional standard and is very collegial. Isn't this interesting, everybody? I'm going to in the next hour, I'm going to that site, Middle East Perspectives, especially those interested in or who are Ukrainian. Barbara has just reminded us they did a piece um, on the financing aspects and how a
here, I can put the link in the chat if people
this would be
want
great. This would be great.
it. Let's
This
see if I
is really wonderful. Um,
here we go, right here. I'll just put this in
Yeah,
the chat,
and
make it easy
while
for you.
you're doing this, of course, we all remember when the Russian Federation began using Iranian drones. This was a extremely ugly episode. We're glad that many of those drones were defective. That was nice.
Not defective enough.
Yeah, not defective enough, I guess so. Thank you. I have right-clicked on your URL, and let's see, you are now video muted, but we can feel your presence, Barbara. Let's see. You do not appear on my screen, but anyway, oh, here we go.
Here, I can
I
name it.
just, yeah, there you
Yeah.
are. There, okay.
Anyway, there are lots of articles, by the way, on the site if people look through it on Russia and Iran, and the nature of that relationship, which might also be of interest for folks. There are many other pieces.
This is absolutely marvelous. Barbara Slavin, you've opened up this whole world. I feel, although this is, and Elena Fonova, one of our star Ukrainians, thanks you especially. Um, um, Again, this may not be a pleasant topic, but it's something other than the daily grind of the horrible tragedy and series of tragedies in Ukraine. We do need to look at a wider perspective, and today you have helped us do that. We're really very, very grateful. Katinka Korn, who is very emotionally and intellectually engaged in this issue, says incredibly exciting and informative. Thank you very much. Thank you, Katinka. Katinka writes from a small town in Germany, and she's a supporter of her community and of Ukrainian refugees in her community. So these talks, and Sergei Mikhailaichuk also asked, but I thank you, Barbara. This has been absolutely wonderful, and forgive my ignorance if you can. And but the reason you're here is to make my ignorance less and my knowledge more. You have done so. Thank you very much. Everybody says thank you. Wonderful session. Next week, folks, no meeting. Following Monday, Tom Pickering, who was ambassador in 5 countries and ambassador to the United Nations during Gulf War I. He has a lot to offer to us, and I hope you'll join us on that day, which would be the 17th, March 17th. It's in your Google Classroom link. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye for today.
Slava Ukraine.